First-class passengers don't usually look like you, sir." The words sliced cleanly through the crowded gate lounge, sharp enough to silence the rolling suitcase wheels nearby. Elias Carter stopped mid-step, his boarding pass still raised between two fingers as the white gate agent stared at him with a smile that never reached her eyes. Around them, travelers shifted uncomfortably beneath the cold LED lights of Terminal C at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Rain streaked down the massive runway windows behind the boarding lane, blurring the distant airplanes into silver ghosts. Elias glanced once at the digital screen above the gate. Flight 118 to San Francisco. First-class boarding now. Then he looked back at the woman blocking his path. Amanda Whitmore. Mid-30s. Perfect blonde bun. Navy airline blazer pressed so sharply it looked untouched by life itself. Her hand remained stretched across the scanner as if physically stopping him from stepping forward. Beside Elias, 8-year-old Naomi tightened her grip around his hand. Her little pink backpack rested against her knees, and her eyes moved nervously between the adults. "Dad," she whispered softly. "Did the ticket not work?" Elias looked down at her, his expression calm despite the tension thickening around them. "The ticket's fine, baby." Amanda gave a short laugh beneath her breath. "Sir, I scanned it already." She tilted her head slightly, lowering her voice just enough to sound polite while making sure everyone nearby could still hear. "This boarding lane is reserved for verified first-class passengers." A businessman standing nearby glanced up from his phone. Another passenger slowly removed one AirPod. Across the waiting area, someone subtly lifted their camera. Elias remained still. 6'3", broad shoulders wrapped in a charcoal hoodie damp from the rain outside. Dark jeans. White sneakers slightly worn near the soles. No designer logos. No visible watch. No performance. Just a tall black man traveling with his daughter. Amanda's eyes swept over him once more, calculating him the same way people often calculated men like him in places built around status and appearance. Naomi looked up again, confused now. "But we're sitting in the big seats," she said quietly. A couple standing near the scanner exchanged awkward glances. Amanda's smile tightened. "Sweetheart, sometimes people stand in the wrong line by mistake." Elias slowly exhaled through his nose. The airport hummed around him. Coffee machines steaming from a nearby cafe. Flight announcements echoing overhead. Thunder rumbling faintly outside the glass walls. He had spent his entire life recognizing moments like this. The look, the assumption, the invisible calculation happening behind someone's eyes before they ever learned his name. 27 years ago, his mother used to mop floors in this very airport during overnight shifts. He still remembered sitting on overturned supply buckets at 2 in the morning while she polished terminal windows beneath fluorescent lights that made exhaustion look permanent. He remembered the way executives walked past her without seeing her at all. Naomi tugged gently at his sleeve. "Dad," Elias finally lifted his boarding pass slightly higher. "Could you scan it one more time?" he asked calmly. Amanda didn't move. "Sir, I already explained the issue, and I'm asking politely." Her jaw tightened almost invisibly. The scanner beeped again as another first-class passenger boarded behind them. A white man in a tailored gray suit walked through without even showing ID. Amanda welcomed him instantly with a bright professional smile. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Patterson." Then the smile disappeared the second she turned back toward Elias. "Look," she said, folding her arms now. "We can avoid embarrassing this little girl if you just step aside and let the Real passengers board." Silence spread outward like spilled ink. Naomi's face fell. Elias felt her small fingers grip his hand harder. Somewhere behind them, a phone camera lifted higher. And for the first time that night, something cold moved behind Elias Carter's eyes. Naomi lowered her eyes toward the polished airport floor, watching the reflection of the boarding lane lights shimmer beneath her sneakers like broken strips of ice. Elias felt the small change in her breathing before he even looked down at her. She was trying not to cry. That hurt more than Amanda's words ever could. Around them, passengers continued pretending not to stare while staring anyway. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked entertained. A tall man near the charging station slowly shook his head before returning to his laptop, as if moments like this were simply part of modern travel. Elias had seen that reaction his entire life too. People hated injustice, most when it interrupted their convenience. Amanda adjusted the tablet in her hands and straightened her posture with the confidence of someone certain the system would always stand behind her. Sir, if you continue holding up boarding, I will have to ask security to assist. Her voice remained smooth and controlled, but underneath it sat something colder now. Something personal. Elias glanced briefly toward the rain outside the terminal windows. Water streamed down the glass in silver rivers beneath the flashing runway lights. Somewhere in the distance, a jet engine roared to life, deep enough to vibrate through the floor beneath his feet. Naomi leaned closer against him. "Dad, can we just leave?" she whispered. Elias looked at her carefully. Her curls framed a face too young to already recognize humiliation. Too young to understand why adults sometimes changed the rules when they looked at people who looked like them. He knelt slowly beside her despite the dozens of eyes watching. "Hey," he said softly. "Look at me." Naomi lifted her eyes. "You did nothing wrong. Do you understand?" She nodded once, though uncertainty still clouded her expression. Elias smiled gently anyway. Sometimes people make decisions based on what they think they see. That says something about them, not about us. A woman nearby lowered her phone slightly after hearing that. Amanda exhaled sharply through her nose. "Sir, I really do not have time for a speech." Elias rose back to his feet with calm precision. Up close, the contrast between them felt even sharper now. Amanda looked polished, rehearsed, immaculate beneath the bright airport lighting. Elias looked tired. Human. Real. A man carrying his daughter through another long business trip. After 3 straight days of meetings in Dallas. The hoodie he wore had once belonged to his younger brother before cancer took him at 19. The sneakers on his feet cost less than the carry-on luggage surrounding them. None of it fit the image Amanda expected from Power. And that was exactly the problem. Years ago, before the magazine covers and billion-dollar acquisitions and private investor dinners in Manhattan, Elias had learned something important while watching his mother clean terminals overnight. People often respected wealth only when it performed wealth loudly enough to comfort them. Expensive suits, chauffeurs, gold watches, controlled accents. But the second a black man carried power quietly, people grew suspicious of it. Amanda took a small step forward. "Last warning, sir." Elias stared at her for a long moment. Not angry, not intimidated, just tired in a deeper way than sleep could fix. Then his eyes drifted past her toward the glowing gate monitor overhead. Flight 118. Delayed 15 minutes due to weather conditions. He almost smiled at the irony. Storms had a way of exposing weak structures. Behind him, another passenger muttered under his breath, "Come on, man. Stop making a scene." Elias slowly reached into the pocket of his hoodie. Amanda's shoulders immediately stiffened as though even that movement carried threat. But all he pulled out was his phone. Black case. Slight crack near the corner. Naomi recognized the expression on his face instantly. Calm. Quiet. Dangerous in a way adults rarely noticed until it was too late. Elias unlocked the screen, scrolled once through his contacts, and paused over a single name while the thunder outside rolled low across the Atlanta sky. The contact on Elias Carter's screen read Daniel Brooks, Chief Operating Officer, Aurelius Air. The same airline currently boarding Flight 118 beneath the glowing blue gate sign above Amanda Whitmore's head. Elias stared at the name for 2 silent seconds while the terminal buzzed around him. Then he locked the phone again without making the call. Amanda noticed immediately. "That is what I thought," she said, folding her arms tighter. "People threaten complaints. All the time." Elias slid the phone calmly back into his pocket. "I was not threatening anyone." "Then you should probably step aside." Naomi looked up at him nervously. "Dad." Before Elias could answer, a new voice cut through the tension. "What seems to be the issue here?" A tall white man in a Navy operations jacket approached the gate with quick, impatient strides. His ID badge swung against his chest beneath the fluorescent lighting. Greg Holloway, terminal supervisor, mid-40s, clean haircut, polished shoes. The type of man who moved through airports like he owned the oxygen inside them. Amanda straightened instantly. This passenger is refusing to cooperate. Greg barely glanced at Elias before looking toward Amanda instead. "Ticket issue. Behavior issue," Amanda corrected. He attempted to enter the first-class lane with an invalid boarding status. Elias spoke evenly. "My boarding pass scanned correctly." Greg finally looked at him fully then. His eyes paused briefly on the hoodie, the jeans, the tired expression, the black child beside him. Something hardened behind his professional smile almost immediately. "Sir, if there has been a misunderstanding, we can help you rebook into the proper cabin." Naomi frowned. "But we already paid for the front seats." Greg ignored her completely. Elias noticed that too. The rain intensified outside the terminal windows, rattling softly against the massive glass overlooking the runway. Lightning flashed somewhere far beyond the taxiing aircraft, briefly illuminating the silver wings parked outside like sharpened blades. More phones had appeared now. People sensed something unfolding. Not loud enough to become dangerous, just uncomfortable enough to become entertainment. Amanda lowered her voice again. "He is causing a disturbance in front of premium passengers." Greg nodded slowly as if the conclusion had already been decided before he arrived. "Sir, I need you to come with me." Elias remained motionless. For what reason? Failure to comply with gate staff instructions. Naomi's fingers wrapped tighter around Elias's hand. "Dad, are we in trouble?" Greg sighed the way adults sigh when they pretend patience is. Generosity. "Nobody is in trouble. We just need to resolve this privately." Elias looked around the terminal lounge. Marble floors. Designer luggage. Expensive watches glowing beneath airport lights. Men in tailored coats sipping $12 bourbon from crystal glasses at the nearby lounge entrance. People who would never be asked to prove they belonged before stepping onto a plane. Greg extended one hand slightly toward the side corridor. "This way, sir." Elias did not move. Instead, he studied the man standing in front of him. Greg Holloway looked confident because he believed the institution behind him was untouchable. That confidence fascinated Elias. Especially tonight. Especially now. Across the country, Aurelius Air's executive board was currently sitting inside a glass conference room on the 39th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper waiting for a final investor confirmation call scheduled in less than 1 hour. The airline had been bleeding money for 18 months. Delayed expansion deals. Failed fuel contracts. Shareholders quietly panicking behind polished smiles. Most employees did not know the full truth yet. But Elias did. Because 3 weeks earlier, his investment group had quietly acquired enough shares to become Aurelius Air's single largest stakeholder. By sunrise tomorrow morning, the deal would become public, and every executive inside the company would answer to him. Greg took another step forward. "Sir, I am asking politely." Elias finally smiled. Not warmly, not arrogantly, just slightly. The kind of smile that appeared when a man realized a storm had already started and nobody else in the room could hear the thunder yet. Then his phone began vibrating inside his pocket. The vibration against Elias Carter's leg stopped after 2 short pulses. Then it started again immediately. Persistent. Urgent. The terminal lights reflected softly across the dark screen of his phone through the fabric of his hoodie pocket while thunder rolled somewhere beyond the runway. Greg Holloway noticed the movement first. "Sir, I need your full cooperation right now." Elias slowly removed the phone and glanced at the incoming caller. Daniel Brooks. Again. Naomi looked up at him carefully. "Is it work?" she whispered. Elias nodded once, but did not answer the call yet. Greg's expression tightened. "You can take that after we resolve this." Elias looked at him calmly. "This is the resolution." Amanda crossed her arms harder against her chest. Unbelievable. Around the gate lounge, the energy had shifted. What had started as casual airport tension now felt heavier. Sharper. Several passengers openly watched now, without pretending otherwise. A teenager near the charging station whispered something into his livestream camera while panning slowly toward Elias and Naomi. Comments rolled across his screen faster than he could read them. Some defending Elias. Some mocking him. Most simply hungry for drama during a delayed flight. Naomi leaned closer against her father's side. Her eyes drifted toward the phones pointed in their direction. "Dad, why are they filming us?" Elias looked down at her soft brown eyes and felt something tighten quietly inside his chest. He remembered being 10 years old himself, watching security question his mother outside an employee entrance because someone assumed she had stolen cleaning supplies. He remembered how humiliation lingered long after words disappeared. "Because people forget other people are human when there is a screen between them," he said softly. Greg exhaled impatiently. "Sir, enough with the speeches." Elias finally answered the phone. "Daniel." The shift was immediate. His voice remained calm, low, controlled. But suddenly it carried weight. Real weight. The kind built inside boardrooms instead of airport terminals. Daniel Brooks spoke rapidly on the other end, his voice faint beneath the noise of boarding announcements overhead. Elias, where are you? The investors are already assembled. Elias glanced slowly around the gate. Amanda still standing with folded arms. Greg Holloway trying to project authority. Naomi clutching his sleeve. Rain sliding endlessly down the windows behind them. I am currently being denied access to my seat by your staff, Elias said evenly. Silence. Even through the phone, silence felt loud. What? Daniel finally said. Elias did not raise his voice. Gate C-18. Flight 118. Greg's expression changed slightly. Not fear yet. Just confusion. Amanda stepped forward. Sir, you cannot record employees without consent. Elias looked at her calmly. I am not recording you. Then he lifted the phone slightly away from his ear. Daniel, would you like to introduce yourself? The voice that exploded from the speaker carried enough authority to freeze half the terminal. This is Daniel Brooks, Chief Operating Officer of Aurelius Air. Who exactly am I speaking to at Gate C-18? Greg's face drained almost instantly. Amanda blinked hard. Wait. Daniel continued before either could respond. And why is Mr. Carter calling me personally from a boarding dispute? The teenager live streaming nearby lowered his phone slightly in disbelief. Naomi looked up at her father with confusion turning slowly into realization. Greg swallowed visibly now. Mr. Brooks, I think there has been some misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Daniel snapped. Do you have any idea who you are standing in front of? The airport suddenly felt quieter even though nothing around them had actually stopped. Rolling luggage. Boarding announcements. Coffee grinders. Distant thunder. Yet somehow all of it faded beneath the pressure gathering at Gate C-18. Amanda's posture finally cracked. Just slightly. Elias watched her carefully. Not with satisfaction. Not with anger. Just observation. Because this was the moment people always revealed who they truly were. Not when they believed someone was powerless, but the second they realized power had been standing in front of them the entire time. Greg Holloway grabbed the edge of the boarding counter hard enough for the tendons in his hand to tighten beneath his skin. The confidence that had filled his posture only moments earlier was disappearing piece by piece beneath the cold white lights of Gate C-18. Amanda Whitmore looked between Elias Carter and the phone in his hand, as though her brain could not decide which version of reality to believe anymore. The black man in the worn hoodie standing beside a little girl no longer fit the story she had built in her head 5 minutes earlier. Daniel Brooks's voice still thundered faintly through the speaker. I asked a question. Greg cleared his throat quickly. Mr. Brooks, there appears to have been confusion regarding boarding verification procedures. That is corporate language for saying your employees profiled someone, Daniel replied sharply. The passengers nearby went completely silent now. Even the teenager live streaming lowered his voice instinctively, sensing the moment had shifted beyond ordinary airport drama. Naomi slowly looked around the terminal. Strangers who had ignored her before were suddenly staring at her father differently now. Some embarrassed, some nervous, some curious in the ugly way people become curious after realizing they may have witnessed something wrong. Elias remained perfectly still through all of it. Calm, controlled, almost detached. But inside, something older was stirring. Not rage. Exhaustion. The deep, exhausting kind that came from spending an entire lifetime proving you belonged in rooms people never questioned for others. Daniel's voice cut through again. Put your regional director on the line immediately. Greg nodded before realizing Daniel could not see him. Yes, sir. Right away. Amanda finally found her voice again. Mr. Carter, if there has been any misunderstanding, I assure you we follow all customer service protocols equally. Elias looked at her for a long moment. Do you? The question landed softly, but somehow that made it worse. Amanda's lips parted slightly without an answer. Naomi tugged gently on her father's sleeve. Dad, why are they acting different now? Elias lowered his eyes toward her. Her small face reflected confusion more than fear now. Innocent confusion. The kind children carry before the world teaches them what status means. He crouched slowly beside her again, while expensive shoes shuffled awkwardly around them on the polished marble floor. Because some people only respect others after they learn what they can lose, he said quietly. A woman standing nearby looked down immediately after hearing that. Another passenger slowly turned off his phone camera. Shame had begun spreading through the gate lounge like smoke no one wanted to acknowledge. Breathing in. Then suddenly, every monitor above the boarding area flickered once. Blue screens shifted to red warning banners. Boarding paused. Flight information disappeared. Nearby scanners emitted sharp error tones one after another across the terminal. Amanda stared upward in confusion. What is happening? At the same moment, Greg's work phone exploded with notifications. One call after another. One message after another. His face lost even more color as he answered. Yes, I am here now. He listened for several seconds before straightening completely. Understood. Slowly, he lowered the phone. The executive operations team is on their way down here. Amanda blinked hard. What? From headquarters. Rain hammered harder against the giant runway windows now, turning the world outside into streaks of silver and white beneath the storm clouds. Across the terminal, airport employees suddenly began whispering urgently into headsets. A pair of managers hurried past the gate at nearly a jog. The atmosphere no longer felt like a customer dispute. It felt like the beginning of a corporate emergency. Naomi looked up toward the frozen boarding screens overhead. Did we break the airport? For the first time all night, Elias smiled softly. A real smile this time. Tired, gentle, human. No, baby, he said quietly. The airport broke itself. Then the elevator doors near the executive lounge opened across the terminal, and 3 senior executives stepped out with panic written openly across their faces. The 3 executives moved through the terminal fast enough to turn heads before they even reached gate C18. Dark tailored coats. Security badges swinging against pressed shirts. Faces stretched tight with the kind of panic corporate people tried very hard to hide in public. The tallest among them, a silver-haired woman named Rebecca Langley, stepped forward first. Senior Vice President of Customer Operations. Her heels clicked sharply across the marble floor before stopping directly in front of Elias Carter. For one suspended moment, nobody spoke. Rain hammered the runway windows behind them while red boarding alerts continued flashing across the terminal. Monitors overhead. Naomi stood quietly beside her father, holding his hand with both of hers now. Rebecca finally lowered her voice. Mr. Carter, I sincerely apologize for this situation. Amanda Whitmore looked like she had forgotten how to breathe. Greg Holloway stared downward at the floor tiles as if eye contact itself had become dangerous. Elias said nothing immediately. The silence stretched longer than anyone expected, long enough for the terminal noise to return around them in fragments. Rolling luggage, coffee machines steaming, thunder rumbling low beyond the storm outside. Somewhere nearby, a baby laughed softly, completely unaware of the tension freezing the adults around gate C18. Rebecca tried again. We were not aware you had already arrived at the airport. Elias glanced at her calmly. Interesting sentence. Her expression faltered slightly. Sir, not aware I arrived. Elias repeated softly. Not aware I existed. Those are 2 different things. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Naomi slowly looked up at him. Her father's voice remained calm, but she could hear the sadness underneath it now. The kind sadness children notice before adults do. Rebecca inhaled carefully. Mr. Carter, we value every passenger equally. Elias almost smiled at that. Almost. Do you? He looked around the terminal lounge again. At the expensive watches. At the silent phones lowered halfway. At Amanda standing rigid beneath the boarding scanner she once controlled so confidently. Because your employees seemed very comfortable deciding who belonged in first class before scanning anything twice. Amanda finally stepped forward, her voice shaking slightly now. Sir, I never intended. Elias turned toward her gently. Not cruelly. Somehow that made her discomfort worse. You intended exactly what you believed you were allowed to intend. Amanda's eyes immediately filled with shame. Not public embarrassment. Real shame. The dangerous kind that arrived when people suddenly saw themselves clearly for the first time. Outside the terminal windows, lightning flashed across the wet runway, illuminating the airport in silver for half a second before darkness settled back over the storm. Naomi leaned softly against Elias's arm. Dad, yes, baby. Why does everybody keep apologizing now? The question floated into the silence like something fragile. Nobody answered immediately. Even Rebecca Langley lowered her eyes. Elias looked down at his daughter carefully, then toward the gate scanner, toward Amanda, toward the polished airport floors where his mother once spent entire nights mopping footprints that powerful people never noticed leaving behind. He remembered sitting beside vending machines at 3 in the morning while she ate cold fries during 10-minute breaks. He remembered her telling him something once after a businessman accused her of stealing a wallet she later found under his own chair. Some people see uniforms before they see humans. Elias swallowed slowly against the memory. Then he crouched beside Naomi again beneath the cold airport lights. Because now they know my job title, he said quietly. Naomi frowned slightly. But you were still you before. Elias looked at her for a long moment. Rainwater slid endlessly down the giant windows behind them like tears the sky could no longer hold back. Yes, he whispered softly. I was. The silence at gate C-18 no longer felt tense. It felt exposed, like the entire terminal had been stripped down to something raw and uncomfortable beneath the cold airport lighting. Amanda Whitmore stood frozen beside the boarding scanner, her hands trembling faintly against the tablet she still held too tightly. Greg Holloway remained several feet behind her now, suddenly careful about every movement he made, every breath he took, as if authority itself had become fragile. Rebecca Langley glanced toward the cluster of passengers still lingering nearby with their phones lowered halfway. The live stream had already spread far beyond the terminal. She knew that. Everyone in corporate operations knew it now. Her own phone had not stopped vibrating for nearly 3 minutes. Public relations, legal, investors, news outlets, all circling the same disaster unfolding live beneath the storm outside. Then another figure appeared near the executive elevators. Daniel Brooks himself. Tall, silver-haired, expensive charcoal overcoat darkened slightly from the rain outside. The moment employees recognized him, the energy in the terminal shifted again. Not fear exactly. Something heavier. Final. Daniel walked straight toward Elias Carter without acknowledging anyone else first. Elias. Elias extended his hand calmly. Daniel shook it firmly with both hands. I am sorry, Daniel said quietly. And unlike the others, he sounded sincere. Naomi blinked up at the older man curiously. Are you the airplane boss? A faint smile touched Daniel's face despite everything. Something like that. He crouched slightly to her level. Your father is a very important man. Naomi glanced up at Elias again. I know. The answer landed softly in the silence surrounding them. Daniel slowly stood back upright and finally turned toward Amanda and Greg. The warmth vanished from his expression immediately. Do either of you understand what has happened here tonight? Neither answered. Rain crashed harder against the massive windows overlooking the runway while red delay notifications continued pulsing across terminal screens overhead. Daniel's jaw tightened. Mr. Carter finalized acquisition control of this airline at 9:07 this morning. Amanda's face emptied completely. What? 38% controlling interest, Daniel continued coldly. By tomorrow afternoon, every executive restructuring decision in this company will pass across his desk. Several nearby passengers audibly gasped. Someone near the lounge entrance whispered, Oh my God. Greg Holloway looked physically ill now. Amanda's eyes drifted slowly back toward Elias, as if seeing him for the first time all over again. The hoodie, the tired eyes, the little girl holding his hand. Her entire understanding of power had collapsed in less than 10 minutes. But Elias did not look triumphant. That confused her more than anything. Most powerful people she had encountered enjoyed moments like this. They stretched them out, made examples out of others. But Elias Carter only looked tired. Deeply tired. Daniel gestured sharply toward the frozen boarding systems overhead. Do you know why operations paused? Across this terminal? Greg swallowed hard. No, sir. Because the entire executive board stopped their emergency investor meeting the second Mr. Carter called me from this gate. The words settled like thunder. Passengers stared openly now. Airport staff whispered into headsets nearby. Amanda's breathing became shallow. I did not know who he was. Elias finally looked directly at her again. Calm, steady, human. That, he said softly, was the whole problem. Amanda's eyes immediately filled with tears she clearly fought to control. Not because she feared losing her job anymore. Because she understood. Finally understood. Elias glanced toward the rain sliding endlessly down the runway windows. His reflection stared faintly back at him through the glass beside Naomi's smaller silhouette. For a brief second, he saw his mother there too. Tired shoes, cleaning cart, night shifts, invisible labor beneath fluorescent lights. He remembered her once telling him something while waiting for a late bus outside this very airport. Never waste your soul proving your humanity to people committed to misunderstanding it. Elias closed his eyes briefly against the memory. Then he opened them again and looked back at the room that had finally gone completely silent. Nobody at gate C-18 moved for several long seconds after Elias Carter spoke. The storm outside rolled across the runway in low waves of thunder, while rain blurred the airport lights into soft silver streaks against the giant windows. Amanda Whitmore stood perfectly still beneath the boarding scanner, her makeup beginning to crease slightly beneath the pressure building behind her eyes. Around the terminal, travelers who had once watched the confrontation with quiet amusement now avoided looking directly at Elias at all. Shame had changed the temperature of the room. Daniel Brooks slowly removed his glasses and rubbed one hand across his face. Even he looked exhausted now. "Mr. Carter," Rebecca Langley said carefully, "we are fully prepared to take immediate disciplinary action." Amanda's head snapped upward slightly at the word disciplinary. Greg Holloway lowered his eyes toward the floor again. Elias remained silent for a moment. Naomi leaned softly against his side, watching the adults carefully the way children do when they realize something important is happening beneath the words themselves. Then Elias looked toward Amanda again. She looked smaller now somehow. Not physically, spiritually. The certainty she carried earlier had collapsed completely beneath the fluorescent lights. "Tell me something honestly," Elias said quietly. Amanda swallowed hard. "Sir, if my name had not mattered tonight, if my money had not mattered, would you still think you were wrong?" The question struck deeper than any public humiliation could have. Amanda's lips trembled faintly before she answered. I do not know." Elias nodded slowly. "That is the problem." Rainwater slid down the glass behind them in endless silver lines while boarding alerts continued blinking overhead. Somewhere nearby, a janitor quietly pushed a mop bucket past the gate entrance. Elias noticed immediately. So did Naomi. The older black woman kept her eyes lowered as she worked, clearly trying to avoid the attention gathering around the terminal. Elias watched her for one silent second too long. Memories flooded back instantly. His mother working overnight shifts. Dry cracked hands smelling faintly of industrial cleaner. Shoes soaked after walking terminal floors for 10 hours straight. Invisible to nearly everyone around her. Naomi tugged gently on his sleeve again. "Dad." "Yes, baby." "Is that what Grandma used to do here?" Elias looked toward the janitor again before answering softly. "Yes." Naomi stared quietly at the woman pushing the mop cart through the polished terminal. Then people should be nicer to her. The simplicity of it nearly broke something inside him. Daniel Brooks lowered his head slightly after hearing her words. Rebecca looked visibly emotional for the first time all night. Even Greg Holloway shifted uncomfortably where he stood. Elias slowly turned back toward the executives. "I am not interested in destroying anyone tonight," he said calmly. Amanda looked stunned by that. "But this airline has a sickness inside its culture." Nobody interrupted him now. A sickness where people decide. Worth before humanity. Appearance before truth. Status before dignity. His voice never rose. It did not need to. The silence around him carried every word farther than shouting ever could. Elias glanced once more toward the janitor disappearing around the corner of the terminal hallway. "My mother cleaned airports for 31 years, he continued quietly. And every single day people looked through her like she was part of the furniture. Amanda's tears finally slipped free despite her efforts to stop them. Elias saw them and did not look away. Tonight my daughter watched strangers decide who her father was before hearing him speak. Naomi slowly slipped her hand into his again. "That cannot happen again," Elias said softly. Daniel Brooks straightened immediately. "It will not." Elias looked directly at him. "I want mandatory bias training across every airport division in this company." "Done." "Scholarship funding for airport employees' children." Daniel nodded again, without hesitation. "Done." Elias paused one final moment beneath the flashing red terminal lights before speaking again. "And nobody loses their job tonight simply to make headlines look cleaner tomorrow." Amanda looked up sharply in disbelief. Real disbelief. Elias met her eyes calmly. "People learn better from accountability than fear." The terminal fell silent once more beneath the sound of rain. 30 minutes later, the storm over Atlanta had softened into steady rain. The chaos at Gate C-18 had faded into something quieter now, almost unreal beneath the pale midnight glow of the terminal lights. The boarding systems were restored. The red warning banners had disappeared from the monitors overhead. Passengers moved through the airport again with lowered voices and careful glances, as if everyone understood they had witnessed something larger than an argument at an airline gate. Elias Carter stood near the windows overlooking the runway while Naomi slept against his shoulder, her small arms wrapped loosely around his neck. Her pink backpack rested beside his feet. Outside, aircraft lights shimmered across the rain-soaked tarmac like floating stars trapped beneath the clouds. Daniel Brooks approached slowly, holding 2 updated boarding passes in one hand. "The plane is ready whenever you are," he said quietly. Elias nodded once. "Thank you." Daniel hesitated before speaking again. "The board reviewed your requests already." Elias looked toward him calmly. "And every one of them passed unanimously." A faint smile touched Elias's face for the first time that night. Not pride, relief. Somewhere deeper inside the terminal, a floor buffer hummed softly against marble tile. The sound instantly pulled him backward through time again. His mother pushing heavy cleaning equipment through empty gates after midnight, while businessmen slept on flights above the clouds. He used to think airports sounded lonely at night. Now he realized they sounded tired, just like the people who kept them running. Nearby, Amanda Whitmore stood quietly beside the boarding desk alone. Her posture looked different now, smaller somehow, less polished, more human. She stared down at the scanner she had guarded so fiercely earlier, as if trying to understand how a machine could become a mirror. After several seconds, she finally walked toward Elias slowly. Careful, uncertain. "Mr. Carter?" Elias turned toward her. Naomi stirred slightly against his shoulder, but did not wake. Amanda swallowed once before speaking. "I know apologizing does not erase what happened." Elias said nothing. She glanced briefly toward Naomi sleeping peacefully against him. "But I am sorry she had to see that." The honesty in her voice felt different this time. No performance, no corporate language, just regret. Elias studied her quietly beneath the dim terminal lighting. Then he nodded once. "Make sure she sees something different next time she walks through an airport." Amanda's eyes filled again, but she held his gaze this time instead of looking away. "I will." Elias adjusted Naomi gently in his arms and picked up her backpack. The boarding lane ahead finally opened. A flight attendant standing near the aircraft door straightened immediately when she saw him approaching. But unlike before, there was no nervousness in her expression now, only quiet respect. As Elias stepped onto the jet bridge, the warm cabin lights spilled softly across Naomi's sleeping face. Halfway down the corridor, she opened her eyes slightly. "Dad?" she mumbled sleepily. Are we important now?" Elias slowed for one small moment. Rain tapped softly against the narrow jet bridge windows beside them while the airplane engine hummed low beneath the floor. He looked down at his daughter carefully, at her soft curls, her tired eyes, her innocence still mostly untouched by the world. Then he smiled gently and kissed the top of her forehead. "We always were, baby." Naomi smiled faintly against his shoulder and drifted back asleep. Behind them, the airport lights glowed through the rain like distant lanterns fading into the night. Ahead, the first-class cabin waited in complete silence. Elias walked forward slowly beneath the soft overhead lights while the aircraft door closed behind him with one final quiet sound.